Well, stakeholder capitalism also says that the right answers to questions ranging from how or whether to address climate change to how or whether to address systemic racism or racial injustice or misogyny or whatever the core social issues of the day may be, that the people who decide the answers to those questions aren't the citizens in the public square who, in a democracy, are supposed to decide those issues through free speech and open debate where every person's voice and vote counts equally. No, that's not the model. What stakeholder capitalism says is a small group of capitalist elites decide the answers to those questions behind closed doors, kind of like they used to do in old world monarchical Europe, where a small group of labor elites and church elites and business elites used to get together behind closed doors and decide what the right answer is to these questions for the rest of society at large. The American Revolution was fought on the idea that we reject that monarchical model. For better or for worse, the people decide, where everyone's voice and vote counts equally, what the right answers are to political questions that we don't want capitalist interference in. And the thing is, that's not a left-wing argument or a right-wing argument. It's a pro-democracy argument. And it was the inverse of Milton Friedman's concern. And nobody, as best I could tell, had taken that concern up back in 2020 when I started writing about this stuff. And I'm motivated by both saving the integrity of capitalism and saving the integrity of democracy. I think the right way to do that is to keep them apart from one another, to get, like, we have a separation of church and state in this country. I think we should have a separation of commercialism and a separation of politics. But I think that nobody had really put their finger on the pulse of what I see as the biggest threat to democracy today, which is the rise of this new managerial corporatocracy, the managerial class within the private sector, the Larry Finks of the world becoming the bureaucratic, technocratic emperors that tell the rest of the country how to live their lives by using market force to do it. To me, that was a betrayal of what democracy was supposed to be all about. And it's, it's a little bit different than the Friedmanite version of the problem 40 years ago.
Yeah, and I'm probably more partial toward like the free market vision of this, right? Like you have Larry Fink and BlackRock using their insane amounts of capital that is acquired by individuals who are putting their savings and passive funds that BlackRock is then able to use to vote at the shareholder level on behalf of their customers. And to me, it just from a free market perspective, it is the opposite of a free market because it's not an emergent thing. You have a top-down attempt to centrally plan these industries. And I think BlackRock and its pushing of ESG specifically is the perfect example of that. They're using their immense amounts of capital to attempt to force corporate boardrooms to act in a one way. And it's not really the market determining outcomes. It's BlackRock and all their capital.
Yeah, I mean, and look, let's just make the best argument for the other side. They will say that this is the free market working, right? There's no government telling these companies to behave that way. BlackRock just says, hey, it's us, the shareholder, right? And isn't that what the free marketeers wanted? Shareholder primacy. The idea that the CEOs who run these companies, they work for and report to the shareholder. Isn't that the vision of post 20th century capitalism, shareholder primacy driven capitalism? Isn't that what Milton Friedman wanted? Well, here's the thing. It's a problem of language. They claim to be the shareholder, but they're not the actual shareholder. The actual shareholders are the owners of capital, the firefighters, the nurses, the teachers, the doctors, the small business owners, the big business owners. I don't care who they are. They're the owners of capital who are, unknowing to them, having their money managed by a large institution like BlackRock that is using their money to advance an agenda that they themselves disagree with if they actually knew what was going on. And to me, what I've discovered is people didn't realize this. What's happening with their 401k account? What's happening with their pension fund? What's happening with their union funds money? What's happening with their taxpayer money that's wielded by a state treasurer? What's happening with the money in their brokerage account? They have no idea that the people who are managing that money are not just solving.
Hey, do you still have your Bitcoin on an exchange? Don't hold your Bitcoin on an exchange. Take it into self-custody. If you're looking for an easy way to do that, we have the BitKey. BitKey is Bitcoin made easy to use and hard to lose. Take the first step, get your Bitcoin off the exchange. Check out the link in the show notes. That'll get you 20% off your BitKey, or use the code TFTC20 at checkout.
For their financial interests, but are also solving for these other social objectives, some of which they don't even agree with. And even if they did agree with them, they might say, hell, I would rather donate to a philanthropy or to a political cause after you give me the maximal return, because that's my business, that's not your business. So even if I agree with what you're doing, I don't want you to be the one doing it. I want to be doing that in my own time on my own account. And for a lot of people, it's even worse than that because they don't agree with it. And they're donating their philanthropic dollars and their political dollars and their civic dollars to advance one agenda, thinking they're making the world a better place the way they think they're making the world a better place, only to have that erased because BlackRock is pushing a different agenda. And so my principal problem with this actually isn't the content of the agenda that BlackRock and State Street and Vanguard are pushing. I disagree with some of those agendas, just put my cards on the table, but that's not the heart of my criticism. It's that we do not have a class of modern monarchs in the system of American capitalism that get to use other people's money to decide the answers to those questions. And the scale of the problem is so dang large that it actually demands a solution before these entities wield state-like power that's every bit as oppressive as an overreaching government itself. I'll give you one example of this is what's happening in the oil and gas sector right now. If the thought experiment, I think I said this on CNBC a few weeks ago. If you do that just as a thought experiment, you got the CEOs of Exxon, ConocoPhillips, and Chevron, and BP, and Shell, all right, get together in a room, and they coordinate to decide to cut gas production, and then gas prices spike at the pump as a result of that. We have a word for that in this country. It's called price fixing. It's an antitrust violation. Cut and dry, that's a problem. But somehow now the largest asset managers in the world force those companies through shareholder mandates. I use shareholder in air quotes, but shareholder mandates to do the same thing. And somehow we celebrate that as ESG instead. This is something that's duping the everyday citizen. And you know, it gets even worse. You just go layer after layer. You peel this onion. It gets more and more rotten the closer you get to the core. So let's take that example further. They have them cut oil production, right? How do they do it? Well, BlackRock and State Street and Vanguard, they voted in favor of 3 dissident directors that made it onto the board of Exxon last year as part of an activist campaign for a revised climate change strategy at Exxon. All right. So before this activist campaign, Exxon's business plan was to increase oil production by 25% over the next 5 years, 2020 to 2025. Afterwards, they seat the new directors. Exxon changes its business plan. They change Exxon's business plan to reduce oil production 20% from those prior forecasts in that same period. Now, you would think that that's bad enough, and it is bad enough. I mean, look, Exxon's a less successful company, in my opinion, as a result. There's a gas shortage. There's an oil shortage in the country. Gas prices are spiking. Coordinated action against America's largest oil company, the world's largest oil company,